All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Samson. I think I should get started. Thank you for logging in and join us this evening. Or this evening for me right now is 10 p.m. in Singapore's time. So trying to struggle to keep awake. So if I do drift off, please, you know what's happening. Okay, so for today's talk, is about the webinar is about the fourth industrial revolution. I want to ask this question: whether is it a boon or is it a bane for pedagogical innovation in learning? So very quickly over here to the next slide. This is a little bit about me. That's me. I'm Samson. You can find my email address and my LinkedIn contact over here in this slide. I'm most happy to connect with everyone else this evening. Okay, evening. I keep saying evening because to me it's evening. Yeah, but to the rest of you in Americas, good morning to all of you, and of course in Europe in the afternoon. So I'll just very quickly talk a little bit more about myself. Okay, I just got, you should stop typing. Okay, yeah, I just got a message from Ulysses, right? So just quickly about where I work. I'm with the center. I'm working for National Institute of Education. I'm the head of the Center for Innovation in Learning. So this slide shows you a little bit about my colleagues and the kind of work that I'm doing. So if you search for Center for Innovation in Learning at NIE, they'll take you to this web page over here. So basically, our center. We have total about 20 over people. We have the learning designers. We have education technologists. We have our multimedia designers, and I have programmers. I have got a video resource designer and producer. So basically what we do is that we work with our faculty members to look at how we can design, develop their courses to make it innovative in learning by harnessing technology. So there we are. That's my center over here. So very quickly, I'll get started with what we're going to talk about, what's happening out there. Right. So the next slide shows something like this now. We have quite a bit of discussion over here in this part of the world, in Singapore, talking about work ready. Is it equivalent? I deliberately ask these questions about whether is it future ready. So if you look at it from the perspective of our learners, they come to us in the universities, they learn, they're getting ready for the next step. And largely, I would say largely over here is that when we look at the next step is basically entering the workforce. So a lot of the things that we do in teaching and learning is preparing our students for the next step. And there are a number of people say that, well, this getting them ready for work is a very important part of their learning in the university. But of course, it doesn't mean that I agree with this statement over here. But I just want to show this cartoon over here, or rather this comic over here, is that talking about job applicants at IKEA. So a lot of things that they do is that, well, in university we learn a lot of things. It could be academic in nature, but are you able to put that in practice once you leave the institution and get out to the workforce? And so there lies within it about the applications of what we learned in the context of a work environment. I'm not sure whether how is it like over at your part of the world, but definitely in Singapore, there are a lot of quite a number of institutions preparing, including our universities, preparing our students for the workforce. So the part about learning by doing, learning to do that, to play that role in the workforce plays a significantly important part of it. And right now, in a large number of conversation and discussion with colleagues within our universities or other universities in Singapore, we talk about future readiness. What is the future in store for us? Basically, with a lot of changes in the future. So that is another hot topic that we are talking about right now in the workforce. So we largely come to agreement. Okay, our students are able to learn, able to do some things, and then as they get out to the workforce, So this picture I just recently showed to another group of colleagues in the talk. They largely like the idea because this is exactly reflecting what they are doing. But let's say work readiness. I'm going to show you the next slide. Yeah. Over here, yeah, it's a basically came out in the news report. It's about 3 months old, if I'm not wrong. NTU is basically my university is actually Nanyang Technological University. A few of my colleagues they were working on robotics and artificial intelligence. They were able to put together well, a prototype over here, in this case, a robot that assembles IKEA chair frame in 20 minutes. And that was like, when I show this slide, everybody just kept quiet, because remember the previous slide talking about, well, everybody agrees that, yeah, our job, we prepare our students for the workforce. And what you see next is that in this slide, very quickly, the kind of job supposedly that we prepare our student for is easily taken over by a robot. I'm not sure about your circle in which we are talking about future readiness. In fact, this is exactly one of those scenarios that are circulating, and people getting excited or even anxious, trying to peer into the future and seeing some of these jobs that are not just specifically about assembling IKEA chair frame, but in general, in many industries are experiencing very disruptive changes. It could be in banking, could be in engineering, and specifically in IT or various kind of industries. Talking about the AI coming into play, talking about Internet of Things changing the way in which life is as the way that we know it. Yeah. So when we look at this, is that when this picture is showed, is from the excited tone, eventually people start to become very somber. So I wonder why. Yeah, and so when we start talking about this, when we start tracing it back, yeah, we start to see that I'm going to show you this, the fourth industrial revolution. And if you look at it, the origin of it comes from the World Economic Forum, and we have Klaus Schwab. They have put together a book over here, shaping the fourth industrial revolution, and it actually traces back to, when's industrial revolution 1.0, all the way back to as you can see in this picture, and things have changed slowly over time, and now we are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And why is it so special over here is that it is not just one wave in which it's coming, and we are seeing that there's a confluence of three major areas over here. And according to Klaus Schwab, you are saying that there are three, begins with the physical, the digital, and of course the biological advances in the various type of technologies all coming together. And because of that, the disruption is like what we have never seen before. And the kind of situation that we got ourselves into is something that difficult for us to predict or to even forecast how much of the technology has changed in various areas of our life. A few years back, this book came out in 2016. If you have not read the book, I would strongly encourage that take a look at this, and that will probably give you more insights in why some people, and particularly our university administrators, are so anxious or excited about the way forward. But the important thing over here is that, like it or not, we are already in the midst of all that I just mentioned. And so in the next slide, tell us a bit more about this. So Klaus Schwab says something like this: the fourth industrial revolution can compromise humanity's traditional sources of meaning, right? Our work, so very much centered around work, our community, our family, and even our identity. Or the alternative would be that it can lift humanity into a new collective and moral consciousness based on a sense of shared destiny. At the end of the day, the choice is ours, what we make out of it. So I thought that is very interesting, yeah, because it seems to say that we are at the verge of something big. In fact, we are, and then we are experiencing all that kind of changes. If you, when we talk to our industrial partner, they keep coming back and tell us that the world is different, the changes are there, and how all this is not turning back, and all that. And so it's quite natural for us to see that why people are uptight, and what is happening when we keep talking over here about the future of work. So inevitably, we talk about the future of learning. So because the workplace is changing, and if you, by the extension, that what we do in education is prepare people for life, and work and community plays such a big important part of our life, and basically we have to change, right? So let's look at this. So the World Economic Forums has they are able to to somewhat trying to take a look at bringing people together from all different types of walks, leaders, captains of industry, to form this think tank. So they have this Center for of Fourth Industrial Revolutions in San Francisco, just launched, I think a few months back. So they put together, and that's one video over here. If you have not watched the video, again, I will encourage you to take a look at this. I'm not able to play the video over here because technically it's a bit difficult, but it's available in YouTube. Please take a look at that. So again, I'll quickly summarize what goes on in this video. Is that they talked a little bit about various field experts, leaders, talking about how we can harness these disruptive forces, and how it is again changing things around. And one of this character, which I towards the end of the video, I think some of us know who. I think quite a number of us probably know him. Is Jack Ma. Jack Ma is the founder of Alibaba, and he mentioned something like this: is like we have to move forward. Whatever that's happened in yesterday, we can't go back anymore. All right, so we have to embrace it and keep moving forward. We can't go back to yesterday anymore. So that's really, you know, cause us, at least for me, to reflect. It is just true. It's actually very difficult for us. We cannot reverse and time and go back to before that. So we just have to look forward to what is happening out there, and then try to deal with that, right? And if you look again at, there are quite a number of publication and some kind of forecast coming up from World Economic Forum, and then this is something that they have come up with, I think, beginning of the year, this year, or end last year, talking about forecasting what are the top 10 skills that is required in the future. In this case, 2020, not so far into the future. So they had they made a comparison between 2020 and in 2015. So you can see there are some changes over here, but the top, right in the top of 2020, you still have complex problem solving. So you can see that problem solving skill is ultra important over here. Thanks so much, Ulysses, that has really put up the link to the YouTube. And then it's followed by critical thinking, creativity, people management, and you have coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, service orientation, negotiation, and one interesting part over here about cognitive flexibility. And why I say interesting about that is that, oh yeah, in quite a number of circles when we have discussions with colleagues and industry captains, they always say that, wow, since things are so fluid, so dynamic, moving forward, we can't really forecast. We need to, have people who are adaptable, right? So adaptable is so easily said, but what do you mean by adaptable? And so cognitive flexibility tell us that how the person can be adapting to different perspectives, different social work contexts. So that seems to be a good way of describing that. So when we look at it, say, well, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, perhaps, to many of us. But the question that we need to ask ourselves is that all those are good skills, but is there any problem with that? Do we think that they are with that picture, or rather that diagram? And I just want to see to we actually put together some of the responses when we talk to people on this, especially my colleagues over here in National Institute of Education. So first thing first is many of those skills that are very hard to measure through the use of mere numbers or quantifying it. So that's one problem over here. But as you know, is that a lot of time in different contexts, we'll try to say, how, for example, you can't look at complex problem solving, how many degrees of complex problem solving. You can't do that. And then again, there's another problem that I posed the question earlier. Work ready, is it really about equal to future ready? So again, we when we think about it, that the purpose of school is not solely to prepare students for the workforce. But if you look at those skills listed earlier in my previous slide, um, they can actually not only go into, in fact, they can go into many aspects of our life. And so if schools were to develop the skills listed needed for 2020, what we should be hoping is that it's not just merely for preparing our students for the future, but we should be thinking about preparing them to create a better future. And instead of just reacting to all these forces that are swarming us or making people anxious or excited, whichever way we want to look at it, yeah, why not we take the bulls by the horn to do that, right? So this is something to think about. We need to focus, well, some of our colleagues say that we need to focus less on helping students to suit a certain path and more on students creating their own way. The shift in the world of focusing more on data is often preparing students for a box that will no longer exist. And I thought that, hey, that is interesting, and that's true, because if you are talking about all the disruptive technology or other kind of various factors they are changing so quickly, and so the box that some of my colleagues say, yeah, it will disappear very quickly. So what we need to do is to start thinking about what are the possible things that could be. And so we look at some research that talks about this. So Sayo, for example, argues that in the contemporary societies undergoing rapid changes, education practices must develop future-ready capabilities, right? To prepare people for a future that is largely, again, we see about work, and not only just work, it's about citizenship, what's in our community, in our society. So it shouldn't be just limited to just work. I think I can agree with this more than just looking at preparing students for work. And I like the way that A.G. Giuliani said this. It's like, our job as educators is not to prepare students for something, right? And our job is actually to help students prepare themselves for anything. So if the future is not something that we can easily predict, then what we should be doing is that prepare our students to take on anything that is thrown at them. And that should be the way that we uh, design or make changes in education itself. So I can agree with that. And then at this point of time, perhaps, okay, I borrowed this from the Matrix. If you have not watched Matrix, then perhaps, well, you can watch that. It's a movie. So Déjà vu, so this thing over here. By this time, you probably look at it and say, well, is it really that those skills that were listed, is it really that different or that new that we have never come across before? The truth of the matter is, you probably have seen something like this. This is what we look at. Core values and all this. This is about 21st century competency. There are various versions of this. So this is what we have over here in Singapore. And so since the way in 1997, the suite of 21st century curriculum initiative were systematically being introduced to refine and strengthen the preparation of Singapore young people, our students, for the 21st century. And so as we review some of all these core competencies, it's actually coincides with a number of those top 10 skills. And over here in our Ministry of Education, they actually launched a 21st century competencies framework. And this is the framework that we're looking at to identify the competency that will help our pre-employment training. That means our students, whether it's in K-12 or in our universities, right, to thrive in a fast changing world, right? That's according to a report at our Ministry of Education. Then you can say, well, very well and good, as like in universities, but since we are talking about getting ready for work, for the future, for industry, shouldn't that talk a little bit more about the where we're heading? So yes, we have this. For adult learners, the following 10 capabilities are identified from existing literature. Yeah, so there you have it over here, future-ready capabilities for adult in the workforce, getting them to be critical for success in the workforce itself. So when you look at this, is that it is not something that just come out from the fourth industrial revolution. It is not something that suddenly comes about in just because the industries are changing, the world is changing. So for the longest time, it's as long as 20 years ago, educators have been thinking about this. So let's look at it a bit more. Coming from a workplace learning perspective, the research that comes up from it, let's take a look at this now. So Tiala asserts that pedagogical approaches such as problem-based learning, case-based learning, and project-based learning provide learning experiences of authentic problems and procedures in working life, right? So that's coming from workplace learning research. Yeah. And what else? The process involved, the process referring to the workplace working process involved practicing many of the skills needed in working life. So combinations of collaboration, the process referring to the PBL process involves practicing many of the skills needed in working life, a combination of collaboration, cooperation, knowledge sharing, independent work, all of which are very important in the world of work. In the world of work, not only about now, but it's also more, even more so when we think about a fluid, very dynamic future that is not that certain for all. And finally, of course, it also says that PBL processes foster development of self-regulative knowledge, metacognitive, reflective skills, which is actually essential for critical thinking, not just limited critical thinking, but complex problem solving, the iterative way of looking at solving a problem. How can you get better and better with that? And that is essential in workplace learning. And then before I go into the examples, so where am I driving at right now? So at the end of the day, I'm starting to answer the questions that I posed right in the beginning. Is it a boon or is it a bane for us, those of us in education, when in terms of pedagogical innovation in learning? So I think I'm based on what we have been discussing with my colleagues, based on what I've been doing my own research, literature review about workplace learning, about how we are doing innovations in learning. I'm at the end of the day become pretty upbeat about this, particularly for those of us in PAN-PBL. We are this network promoting, fostering the use of active pedagogies in teaching and learning, beginning with now circle problem-based learning, project-based learning and team-based learning. In our previous, our last webinar, I think Mark talked about team-based learning. This is one of those many different types of active pedagogies. And if you look at how to prepare our learners to take on the world, we find that we are in one of the best times for those of us who believe in active learning pedagogies. Why do I say that? Is that in the past, we are promoting this, and university or even industry, they don't see that there's urgency to prepare our students for the unknown. Okay, I'll say the unknown because right now our future is pretty uncertain, because changes were quite incremental, it's quite predictable. They are quite happy with their lecture tutorial system, the traditional direct instruction method. They don't see the need to foster a certain kind of skill sets within our students, like for example, the top 10 skills that I mentioned earlier. But right now, there's an urgency. The industry say we cannot do things like what it used to be. The day of yesterday has passed. Right now, you need to look forward. The forward is you need to do this. So I think I'm cautiously optimistic that it is one of the best time for us to not just promote, but when we show people what we can do with this active learning pedagogies, I think the traction, the momentum is likely to accelerate. But then again, it's a lot of effort, I think, from our educators to keep working on that. So the next segment over here, very quickly over here, for maybe the next 5-10 minutes, I'm just going to show you, share with you a few examples which I thought was are very good practices in which how we prepare our students for the future. But before I get into that, I have a disclaimer over here. There are many people, there are many of our colleagues and friends who are doing that, and I'm just zooming into 3 examples. Why these 3 is because I'm familiar with them. I've worked with them and before, so that's why I'm sharing this. One of them is from NIU, of course, because that's where I worked in. And of course, there are a few others that I know of and work with them as well. But I because of the limit in time, I can't go through every one of them, so it's not exhaustive. So here we go. Well, our friends in Auburn University, I have the privilege of to spend some time talking and with our friends. Thanks to our friend Annette Comos, I was able to spend a few days at Auburn University to find out about how they actually integrate problem-based learning. Well, they also got into project-based learning, a blend of various active learning pedagogies in teaching and learning as well. And I think Annette and team has a very strong application of e-learning with problem-based learning as well. So it's really fascinating. But that is not exactly what I'm going to talk about. The university itself has a very interesting way. This is what I found from university website about how they prepare students for the future, leveraging problem-based learning. And the first part of the top, acquiring knowledge and skills independent and not and at a high academic level. I think that's great. But I like the part about working analytically according to the interdisciplinary and problem and result-oriented methods. And that part I really saw for myself how the students from various specialty coming together to solve problems. And it's not just any problem. You can see that I highlighted the third part over here is that cooperating with the business community on the solutions of authentic professional problems. And those of us who are practitioners of problem-based learning say, well, yeah, that's pretty much what we do. Yeah, when I was with Republic Polytechnic, we will try to make it as authentic as possible when we craft problems. But what I saw over at Auburn University was really fascinating. At least I've said that this is my second time for saying that. Yeah, because I was able to participate in some of the problem presentation and discussion, and there's a very I could see that there was a very porous relationship within the university with the industry. I saw industry, particularly the small and medium-sized enterprises, particularly engineering firms, because I was with the School of Engineering. They basically set up shop on campus. They have their offices in campus, working very closely with the academics in looking at solving some of the real problems. They participate in the presentation panel, giving feedback to students, because the problem that the students were solving are real problems in industry, in the companies. And I could still remember, even though they were years ago, 2014, there's one particular problem that they were talking about is about the windmills industry, big windmills that Denmark is very well known for wind energy, as you can see in the picture over there. And one particular problem they were trying to solve is in winter, how do you solve the problem of icing? It's just stuck in my mind, because they are coming from not just from the mechanical, electrical engineering perspective, they are looking at environmental engineering and all sorts of different disciplinary providing the kind of different perspective of solving problem, and not just from academic angle, but real authentic real life situation, and that's amazing. And I'm not sure whether is this just all about universities or the rest of the universities who practice this, is that there's one particular PhD, they call it industrial PhD. And so what it works is that how it works is that the company in the industry will sponsor, with of course with support from the higher education ministry of education, to see that person, that employee, through this PhD course, and that also speaks for the reason why, one of the reasons why the industry partner has got a vested interest in that, in working with the university, coming on board to the university, providing the kind of cooperation with the university. And so the last part about becoming well prepared for the labor market, well, the labor market is shifting, changing right now, and it's futuristic in nature. So I thought of showing this as an example of how about universities from that perspective of doing that. Okay, I have to move very quickly now. Next one. Okay, this is very close to home. This is called Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine. It's actually a school of medicine within. How it forms is basically a partnership between Nanyang Technological University, that's my university, with Imperial College in setting up this School of Medicine. There are two campuses. One is over here in NTU, my university, and the other campus is right together in one of the hospital. Right, and when in Singapore, just very quickly, there are actually three school of medicine. One of them is my alma mater, National University of Singapore. That they have a school of medicine there, and then it's called, in short, it's NUS. So NUS went into partnership with Duke University. So there's a Duke NUS School of Medicine. That's the second university. The interesting thing about Duke is that when they first started, they introduced TBL in the training of team-based learning, TBL, in the training of doctors. And so when we have the third and the latest, the new kid on the block, Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine, came on board, and the management just look at it and say, wow, what kind of doctors do they want to train? And they start thinking about, and having the privilege of being the latest, youngest school of medicine in Singapore, they are peering into the future, and they start to see that the world is changing so quickly. And then they also want to leverage on both universities' strength in technology, right? NTU, Imperial College, well known for being very ahead when it comes to research and practices in technology, and able to help our students prepare for the future. And so they've decided to leverage team-based learning and training our doctors. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly move on over here to talk about just very quickly talk about the TBL learning processes. And I think Mark has done a great job in the previous webinar talking about this. It's very similar, but they are leveraging on some technology over here. The first sessions in which they talk about studying, learning, resources, we put it online and for the students to do it. It could be as simple as PowerPoints, iBooks, pre-recorded lectures, and interviews with scientists and clinicians, right? So all this the students do before they come to class. So when they come in class, they'll be using their mobile devices such as the iPad to take an individual quiz based on the assigned learning material and check their learning. And then students will start to discuss and answer some of the quiz with their team members. The team receives immediate feedback on how well they understood the materials. And so all this done on their own as students, right, in class, before class, in class. And then individual and the team quizzes form the what we call the readiness assurance process, right? And then very quickly, enter the TBL facilitator, one or more content experts, and present and address questions and concerns from the class. The discussion ensures that the students have full understanding of the complex principles in the material, and this process prepares the students for the final stage in the TBL, which is what we call the application exercises. And this AEs, in short, reinforce key concepts and give students insight into the authentic problems and situations that doctors may encounter. The keyword over here is authentic and situations that doctors may encounter. So is that in the same sessions over here, they don't walk away trying to reconcile theoretical concepts with what possibly could be applied in real clinical situations. They have their facilitator who are content experts over there to help them make sense of that. So teams discuss each AEs and come to a decision on the best answer for each of those questions. So the students will, well, in those of us who are familiar with PBL process, the last session over here, they similarly need to debate, they need to defend the reasons for each team's answers. In the final stage, expert faculty will discuss and evaluate each team's answers and conclude by addressing the learning outcomes and achieved at the TBL sessions. So that's Lee Kong Chian School PBL process. So sorry, in interest of time, I need to move on very quickly. And finally, talk about National Institute of Educations and what we do over here. I'm going to summarize that very quickly. And I'll seek your understanding that you will look at go to the website and we have the whole document over there. For me to just briefly talk about this learning process, it doesn't do justice to what we do in preparing students, our student teachers for the future. As you can see over here in National Institute of Educations, our core function mission is basically to prepare our students who are teachers, prepare them to become teachers to teach in our K-12 schools. So there's you can see in this diagram, there's the teacher dimension, there's the learner and NIE dimension, and we think based on research, of course, that the best way of learning is facilitative learning environment. And how do we go about doing that? That we distill from literature, of course, back with research in constructivism, that there are four principles that we follow. The experiential aspect of things, the learning should be multimodal, inquiry-based, and it should be connected. And that helps to enhance students' learning in the 21st century competency learning outcomes. And with that, I have to end this session right now because I think I've taken about 45 minutes to look at this. So again, I will not overly elaborate this part. I encourage that you go to our website, Center for Innovation in Learning. There's a whole lot of articles, a whole document will tell you more about that. With that, I'll just stop and perhaps at this point of time, we can take some questions. Yeah. Okay. Uh, I'm ready. Any questions? Yeah. Sorry, just drink some water. You can use the chat function in the YouTube. Just raise your questions and I'll address it. It's supposed to be, we will be free about 15 minutes. Excuse me. Oh, question about my PowerPoint PDF version. Okay, after this presentation, I will send a copy over to Ulysses over at PAN-PBL, and we'll make it available. But I'm not sure where is it. Yeah. Oh, Lindro, thank you very much. Yeah, yeah. For I'm glad that you like the presentation. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. Whether is it about the okay. So the video will be available in the PAN-PBL YouTube channel, and I can make the PDF version. Sorry, the slides available as well with the PowerPoint. Yep. Okay. Yes. Yes. So it will be available in YouTube. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Any other questions other than the my PowerPoint? Okay. Question about how technology is enhanced in our university. We are looking at in our university. In the past we say that there's ICT, as in info, com, and communication technology. So we integrate that in teaching and learning. And as I shared earlier, the technology is coming from all different directions: physical, digital, biological, and it's really impacting not just on the working world, but societies at large. And so when we look at that, it's not just limited to digital anymore, because if you talk ICT, it's pretty much just digital alone. But we should be enlarging this to look at technology as a whole, how it impacts us. And if you look at it negatively, it's impacting, we have to react to it. But you look at it positively, there's another term in literature that we keep talking about, would be that technology enhanced learning, or even better, technology enabled learning. And so what we do in our university is that any technology that enable us to do things that were not previously possible, that were previously not possible, uh, for us to do this innovation in our pedagogy, we will embrace that. Give one example would be that we just launched Internet of Things Lab in our university. So we have a small team of technical people working with our faculty members of how to introduce Internet of Things to enrich, not just enrich, but to help them do those innovations that were previously not able to. So we have our colleagues in the teaching of science, geography, sports sciences, scientists. They are working with us right now to do that. Uh, if you would like to find out more, again, our website talks a little bit more about that. And if you would like to have a tour of our website, when you visit Singapore, come and look for me, and I will show you more of those things that we do, and we can get our colleagues to have a discussion as well. All right. Let me see now where the other question. Okay, the question from Ed. Ed says that, hello, has Singapore started to integrate the 21st century skills in K-12 standardized testing? K-12 standardized testing. I'm not too sure about whether I quite understand that question, but the integration of 21st century skill in the curriculum, definitely we have done that. And how we test whether students are able to demonstrate, I think I'm trying to interpret what Ed is asking, whether or not students are able to demonstrate that in their standardized tests. Yes and no. We have started on that in the primary school, whereby the students they have gone through changes in the way we assess students' learning, whether we have arrived at what stage that we are happy with. I think it's probably not there yet. It's a continuous work in progress, but we see that we continue to move towards that target of helping to see students demonstrating those traits that we mentioned as top 10 skills. There are much efforts happening in the school, and making it measurable is tremendously difficult, as we mentioned earlier. But we are definitely getting there. Yeah, so that's my, I hope that answers the question. And let me see the next question. Elizabeth mentioned that one of the things I worry about is access to resources like expert in business. Yeah, okay. Especially MS and HS educational communities that are under-resourced. How do you wrestle with that? Wow, that's quite a difficult question. Yeah, under-resourced. I think one of the things that we do, as I recall about bringing people on board, particularly people in the industry, to come in to work with us educators, and that was very difficult. Okay, I think I can resonate with that because over here we have we started on this big movement where we call the skills future. As no prize for guessing, it is part of this future readiness program, and we started that as early as 2015. And our Ministry of Education, we are cognizant of the fact that this is going to be very tough getting the industry to come in to share, in a way, share the load of preparing students for the workplace. For the longest time, they always think that teaching the students is the job of institutions. Providing job for the students is their kind of work. So it's like there were people asking why should they be putting in the effort to help the institution to do that's not their job. They don't see that as their job. But increasingly, we have been engaging them through our agencies to look at relevant skills for the industry. And we had lots of engagement session, persuasion sessions with them as well. Because for the longest time, what we see from the industry is that they has that kind of criticisms is that quite a lot of things that the students learn in school is not so useful in the industry. So we start to talk to them as in like, tell us then, talk to us, work with us. What are the important things that we can do to help our students speed up in terms of getting there to have the right skill sets that the industry will need. And so because of that, over time, and of course, with no less government incentives as well, giving to companies, the first movers to come on board to work with us. So there was certain incentive to get them on board. And right now, we are seeing that the momentum is getting there. It's snowballing, and more industry partners are coming in and willing to work with us in the institution. And we've increased the number of internships, so the companies are welcoming a lot more interns going to the company, work with them, getting them ready. We have longer internships as well, so that students get to immerse in those learning environment in which it's relevant to work, getting them to be really learn something in the workplace rather than just become, sometimes we think that students end up become like cheap labor in the workplace. So a lot of that is changing. So we are getting lessons from Switzerland, Germany, as well as Denmark, Scandinavian countries as well. I mentioned Aalborg universities as one of the examples. I thought that was something that we are changing over here. I cannot say that we are there already, but definitely we are seeing early results, and which are very encouraging, and we continue to work with that. And with the fourth industrial revolution that I just mentioned, I think it's creating a lot more momentum for us to even move even faster. Yeah. Okay. I hope that answers your questions. Yeah. There's another question over here. I uh, Sorry if I get your name incorrectly, Joel, says that I work in an institute that develops teacher. Well, yeah, we are colleagues. We're in the same trade. Okay, and so we have two challenges: preparing the teachers for the present and the future. And so, do you believe it's possible to embrace both, or should we choose one? Oh, that's a very interesting question. Yeah. Um, when we talk about the future of learning, I have an article in LinkedIn. For those of us who are listening to this webinar, perhaps you will want to check it out. A lot of people think about the future. The future. We keep talking about the future, but it's like if you look at if you read the book about the fourth industrial revolution, it was talking about it was published in 2016, if I remember correctly. But the whole chain of event that lead up to that started way much earlier. Anyway, and since then we're talking about the future. But I think many of us don't realize the future is already here. We are in the beginning of the future, and preparing the students for present could become like the past already. And and my thought over here is that by preparing them for what kind of present is the question that we need to ask ourselves. I would say that some of the classroom practices that we do here today, we really need to change that. And as I mentioned earlier, is that if you look at the history of problem-based learning or project-based learning, it's not really, well, it's young, but it's not really that young. We have been doing that for decades. It's just that whether authority, businesses, the various sectors, are they paying attention to that? Some forward-looking, future-oriented has been embracing that, but for some, will still think that, well, it's business as usual. But the great opportunity that the fourth industrial revolution has opened up for us is that you no longer have the luxury of doing things as business as usual. That's the way I look at it. And whether or not, a short answer to that question, Joel, is that I think we definitely can. And we have to redefine what the future entails and whether the present over here is still adequate, and keep those that is adequate for us to use as a stepping stone for our student teachers to move to the future. I don't think everything that we have right now is irrelevant and needs to be thrown out the window. I think we need to really think through how we can help our student teachers launch to the future, because when they enter the classroom to teach their students, they have to prepare them for the future, or more importantly, even better, to create a better future. Yeah, that's my take. I hope that's answered your question. I think we're coming to the last few minutes. I think I can see whether there are a few more questions. I think Elizabeth said, I think PBL efficacy in the higher ed make it promising for much wider implementations at secondary school level, especially in NGSS era. But access to this kind of resources can be challenging. So Elizabeth, I'm not too sure whether what kind of resources you are referring to, but if you are referring to resources in the sense of lesson plans, knowledge in how to implement problem-based learning, I suppose we can, over at PAN-PBL, we are most happy to share or even connect people together. If let's say implementation of problem-based learning at the secondary school setting is very different from the rest of us who are in universities. We have like-minded people who are implemented that at a secondary school level. We can always connect them and then help them to share some of these resources. If resources is in the form of say industry-related kind of learning, I think there are some of us who have that kind of experience as well. As I mentioned earlier, in Singapore, we have what we call applied learning programs in the secondary schools. We are increasingly getting students involved in not just learning the traditional academic subject matters like math and science, but within all these subject matters, there's a higher emphasis in how do you apply them in a real life situation. And then that gives rise to opportunities in which we can bring in problem-based learning, project-based learning. And right now, among the IHLs as well as increasingly in the secondary school setting, design thinking. You are talking about in this era of changes when we talk about human-centered design. And it's like there are many people talking about design for human, right? So what makes us just limit that to design for human and assume that we know what other human being wants? And there's another thought that talks about that is that as we implement human-centered design, we should be thinking about designing with human, right? So it's like it should be unfolding, it should be learning from people, and then that's captures the spirit of design thinking about designing for with human. So that's what we have. So with that, I hope that that answers the questions. If there are other questions, I'm most happy to engage with any one of you, everyone, through email and or through LinkedIn. We can connect and we can have a lot more discussion than that. I think we are coming to the end of the 1 hour. Yeah. Okay. With that, thank you for staying up. Thank you very much, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and hope to catch up with all of you. Bye bye. I will stop streaming now.